Brasil, meu Brasil brasileiro, meu mulato.
Yeah. Brazil is, first, there's not a Brazil. Okay? If you're talking about Brazil, you must start talking about five different Brazils. Yeah. 5 different Brazils that we are not going to in this way, because then you have a Brazil in the south, a Brazil in the southeast, another Brazil in the center, another Brazil in the northeast, and another Brazil in the north. This could be an approach. But what you are talking about, I believe the best way to understand is this stereotypes that you described, that everybody calls Brazil. Yeah. It's a 20th century product, yeah. You know, and it's not built even for all the 20th century, but very specifically from the late 20s to the early 70s. And this cover more or less, you know, a period of 50 years. Yeah. No more. And this is what people call Brazil, in one sense. When you talk about bananas, you know, you're talking about Carmen Miranda and all that happened during this tense time during the Second World War, and when America was draining, you know, allies in South America, and that symbol of the bananas and the exotic country with samba and all that. Even Zé Carioca and all that. And even samba is a 20th century invention, right, that didn't exist at early 1900. Right. It was not there, you know. The way we know the birthday of samba officially was in 1916. If I'm not wrong, November 1916, with a specific samba pelo telefone. This idea of samba, bananas, and even the country of soccer. Right. Man, we were not the country of soccer till 1958. You know, when we won the first World Cup in Sweden, and then 1962 in Chile, and then 1970 in Mexico. And then we were the first ones to win 3 World Cups. Yeah. And then we became suddenly, the country of soccer. This is fabricated. And more specifically, you know, everything that people think that's good about Brazil was experienced in a short period of 20 years. From 1948, 45 to 1968, 69. There's a short period where the most impressive potential of a country, and I agree with Darcy Ribeiro, I agree with other anthropologists that Brazil is a civilization to be, you know. It's the only chance that we have of having something as a new kind of civilization, you know, this mulatto civilization, you know, that mix everything, that's still information, and at this point of history in 2016, maybe we are
2017 even.
2017 now. Yeah, I remember. It's January. And at this point, we could say that we can be an aborted, you know, civilization. Maybe. Let's make some points why I'm saying what I'm saying. First, there's not a Brazil, even a not Portuguese-speaking Brazil, until 1820. Yeah. Until 1820, nobody speaks Portuguese on the streets. They used to speak Nhengatu. That was a mix of Portuguese and Guarani language and the Tupi. That's called the general idiom or língua geral. And around 1820, nobody used to speak, Portuguese. one of the reasons we have developed our Portuguese word because of the slaves. Because the normal farm would have slaves from different countries in Africa that couldn't talk to one another in the same language. Sometimes they were enemies. And they were put together in the same farm, and the only language to talk to the owners was Portuguese. So they actually, the African Brazilian people, they invented the Portuguese we speak. So we didn't have a language till the mid 19th century. And it's amazing that now we have 230 million inhabitants speaking Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And says a lot about what is Brazil.
Yeah.
This ability to transform things into something new. And there's a specific Brazil that was created in the 16th century where land is not way of production or a mean of production is a question of honor. To be a landowner means that you are somebody. So Brazil started in the 16th century not having ever having something like the commons. There was no common land. All land in Brazil was privately owned by someone, by a Portuguese. So there's no space for a common. There's no idea of commons, first thing. Second, so those landowners, they were not only owners of land, but they were owners of souls and people. So to be a landowner is to have land and people. And the coronels that were the captains of the captainias, those space of land, of soil, they rule and they have more power than the king of Portugal. They have total power. Death and life were in their hands. And if you go after the surnames that now are dominating the political scenario in the 21st century, you will find a lot of the same surnames after 500 years. I don't know any other country where you can find this. So, and we have been the last country in the world to abolish slavery. And it was a shame for a white person to work till 1888, 87 was a shame for a white person, even poor, to work. That was for the slaves. And this is the typical division of the country. So, when we had something that could be a project of country under the kingdom of Dom Peter II, and immediately this elite of the country, the landowners, they started reacting when Peter II, the king, the emperor, Brazil has this syndrome of, how to say, greatness.
Greatness, yeah.
The empire of Brazil, the Brazilian Empire. And when Peter II became more modern, like we were the second country in the world to have a telephone, the second country in the world to have a train.
Okay.
The old landowners, they suddenly became from, monarchists into republicans. So we changed everything, the system, the political system of the country, for the country to stay the same. It's not so was to have a revolution, not to change, but to keep.
Right.
It's quite different from other countries. And so those guys ruled from 1889 to 1929 as the elite. But at this point we had an army, we had a lot of influence from the anarchists that came from from Europe in the turn of the 18th to the 19th to 20th century. We have a lot of influence of those that were studying universities, still an elite, less than 1% of the population,
Right.
and they started having this idea of Brazil. All this started with this generation that were young officers of the army in 1920. And among them were guys like Getúlio Vargas, the most important president we had ever had, besides Lula. These guys had a project of Brazil. They differ slightly, but they have this idea of a great Brazil. And culture, industry, and all that. This elite was basically an agrarian elite.
Right.
And they had everything going well in their hands until 1929, when the crash of the New York stock market opened the opportunity for those guys, young guys by the time, around 40 they were, to finally get the power. But they were not people outside of their time. This is the early 30s, What is the world by that time? They are not, the world is not longing for democracy. Not in Germany with Herr Hitler, or in Italy with Mussolini, in Argentina with Perón, in the United States with Roosevelt, that will rule for 5 periods of presidency, and Trujillo and Churchill in England, and de Gaulle in France. So it's a time when people are very wary about democracy and longing for authoritarian leaders with a strong voice. And so Getúlio Vargas was part of this too. He was a man of the 30s, all this eugenic idea of pure race and improving the race and whitening Brazil and all that. So besides them being seen as people of their time, they have a project of Brazil, very generous project, by the way. And this was during the 30s, when Nazism was growing here in Germany, and then the Second World War. And at the end of the Second World War, there was an interruption, and the first attempt of the old elite, now in this other generation of young guys, trying to put off, Getúlio Vargas. Why? Because he was giving space for guys like Villa-Lobos, our best musician.
Yeah.
Villa-Lobos, fantastic. He was given space for a modern architecture, shoulder by shoulder with the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And he was creating a huge industrial park that we still have there. So Getúlio was really creating a new Brazil.
The Samba and Carnival.
And Samba and Carnival was growing by that time, The Protestant religions were arriving, So we were really modernizing Brazil. Mm-hmm. And it was, this dream of development was there, in their heads. And this elite, the sons of those guys that lost in 1930, they were longing to go back to the power. And for a while, in a short period of 4 or 5 years, they kind of get there. But then it's a different world. The United States is with the Marshall Plan here. We won the war with the Allies. So it was not that easy. And then in 1950, Getúlio Vargas come back democratically. And they did the same that they just did in 2016 in Brazil. No, it's a lot of corruption, this government and blah, blah. The same discourse, the same sentence. And they tried to put Getúlio Vargas off. And he was, this is the time of Cold War. And so a new generation is appearing in Brazil around this 50s,
Yeah.
Juscelino Kubitschek, João Goulart, Oscar Niemeyer, and Darcy Ribeiro, Paulo Freire, and the Bossa Nova, You know, it's not only the samba, but now another Brazilian jazz coming in the scene, theater, movies. You know, we're having movies around the 50s, you know, that were, you know, disputing the Oscar. They were, you know, making a lot of money in your area. Cangaceiro belongs to Brazil? No, belongs to Columbia Pictures. That bought, I think Columbia Universal, I don't remember which one, that bought the rights of Cangaceiro. Brazil never saw one dime of the Cangaceiro. And the Pagador de Promessas. And writers like Jorge Amado, you know, this is the idea of Brazil, and this is, wow, we can create a new university and we can democratically make this. And then this elite was forcing Getúlio Vargas to go back. And he was brilliant when in 1954 he killed himself to stop the coup d'etat. And this provoked a delay of 10 years. Then this elite was so frustrated because they were not possible. What happened after Getúlio Vargas? 1 year of very strong tension, trying to put a dictatorship back there. And then Juscelino Kubitschek, 1955. And in 5 years, we built Brasilia. It's a monument for the world. Oscar Niemeyer became the most important architect in the world. Bossa Nova was exported for all other countries. Carnival became a world phenomenon, you know. And universities were, you know, really being popularized by Juscelino. And then the elite again, they were not being able to get the power back. And they tried Jânio Quadros in 1960. Let's elect someone crazy, stupid, and that will get the power. But the vice president was from Getúlio Vargas' party and from this modern Brazil that was growing. And that was a tense time. 1 year after presidency, this crazy Jânio Quadros tried a self-coup d'etat. And he lost. Because even the elite noticed that this guy's crazy. And they tried to impede João Goulart of being on power, and was a 1.5 year very tense. Then in 1963 he started promoting the reforms we need in Brazil: agrarian reform, bank reform, money reform, and urban reform, you know, housing, Petrobras and all that. Again, Petrobras. What happened? March 1964, the hugest coup d'etat that we have. But was not only that elite, they needed to ally with the military. And the military had a plan, a different idea of Brazil, but also modern. So they were not back on the power, they were half on the power, controlled by the military. There was right wing, and sorry, but Brazil is not for beginners, okay? Brazil is a very complex country. So since this elite was allied with the military, you know, but the military has a project of Brazil, and this elite, they were concerned about, you know, having power, and they could sell their souls. And Brazil is the richest country in the world, no question about it. We have as much oil as the Saudi Arabia. We have the nióbio, we have gold, we have iron, we have, you know, electric power,
water,
and the most important reservation of water in the world. So we are the richest country in the world. So the international interest were there. And this dictatorship was a kind of backup, you know, on the process of modernization in Brazil in the sense of culture, music, but what happened in the cracks of that system. Then a new generation appeared. Chico Buarque, Gilberto Gil, and all the Tropicalia movement, the Cinema Novo, and all these things happen, not being totally controlled by the military. And this elite was there. But they were not able to put their, what's the name? Claws on the richest of the country, because the military, they were right-wing, but they had a modern idea, liberal idea of what is a modern Brazil. So with democratization in 1984, and with the lost 80s in the world, with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, we lost a lot. We lost 10 years of the country with hyperinflation and all that. So in 1994, there was this economic plan that eventually led that in 2003 we had the first left-wing government, democratic elected. And in the last 15 years or so, we had a country that exploded in culture, We have created more universities in 15 years than we have created the 100 years before. And a lot of movies, that received prizes throughout the world, documentaries in your area, just talking about your area, and an amazing economic growth, with problems. That is another movie of me that I will not repeat why, but was basically a growth going in the wrong way, in my opinion, because there was a lot of inclusion and 35 million people were included and left poverty. We ended with the chronic hunger that we ever had. There's no one with hunger in Brazil anymore. Soon we will be back with all the hunger and poverty and all that we used to have. And the problem is that this left-wing government ended, becoming allies to the same elite with this, we call in Portuguese novo richismo, this new rich impression. We are left, but we are rich. We are accepting the palaces. We are accepting, different from Mujica in Uruguay, that was a simple guy with his own past. We became part of we tried to become part of the elite, but the left wing is not elite. It's, a bunch of blue collar people, a bunch of non-well educated and polite people, on the palaces of the elite. And the elite say, yes, come. And this time, 2016, for the first time in almost 1 century, the same families came back to power. Now, without the military, without the right-wing intellectuality. It's just a mafia. Those guys are landowners, and they do believe they are owners of peoples and souls. And people are so. So to understand what's happening now in Brazil is to understand that they are finally back. And what's happening in terms of going back in Brazil is not going back to the 60s or the 50s, we're going back to the early 20s or to the 19th century. And if they could go back to slavery in an exaggeration. But they are putting everything back. And the international arrangements is all about, the international bank system that is receiving a lot of money from Brazil, more than in any other country. The international energy system that knows that we have the most important energy reserve of this stupid oil-based industry that we have. And we are becoming a colony again. So this idea of beautiful Brazil, modern Brazil, samba, and a lot of potential, I'm afraid that we are definitively losing this for the next 50 years if we can recover. Because the elite now, that old elite of the colonial times, that old elite is finally back. And they are taking the care of destroying everything. That means culture, that means music, and they definitely are using, a tool that's called education to go back. So we have the worst educational system in the world, I have no doubt about. And this is not an accident, it's a plan. The bad education in Brazil is not accidental, it's a plan. So, at the deep of my heart, I have no hope. I believe we are screwed. No? To use the most polite word that I can choose.
Yeah.
I will not use the F word, because this is what I believe. And unfortunately, those that knew that Brazil of the 50s, of the 60s, of the 70s, good to keep that in their memories, because I don't believe they will come back.
Even thinking about what you said before about the cracks of the system.
Oh, this is the only space for us to leave. You know, I believe that the margins can be a source of hope, but this hope, even though can resurrect in the future, you know, it demand, you know, money, power, and condition for it. And I believe, based on the experience of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, you know, they will not permit these conditions to come back. It demands a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of special conditions to happen. So, my personal belief is to go, instead of, you know, desperate, is to go beyond the desperation and forget about the idea of Brazil. And what I'm doing with my life is to believe in the awake of a new man, a new woman, that's not more molded by the old idea of a country. I believe, Dago, that all this discussion about the country is a good discussion for the turn of the 19th to 20th century. And I do not believe that we need to think about this diffuse idea of a world, but I believe that the only chance for us to experience something new is by localizing extremely and radically our production, our cultural production. It's not to think about the Brazilian culture or even the regional country, the regional culture, but the local culture, the local economy. You know, the most important crack is when you say thanks but no thanks to the idea of country, the idea of the sovereignty. You know, it's just say no thanks but no thanks to anything that the system can offer you. So my bet today, if we have a chance, is by relearning, you know, how to cook, how to sew, how to plant, how to raise animals, how to raise kids, how to have a good marriage, how to recover the locality instead of the nationality. This would be my bet. So I think it's a waste of time to try to go back to that idea of the 50s of Brazil.
Right.
My bet would be, forget about that. They have stolen the idea from us. They took in their hands. The first sign, for example, of this coup d'etat was to recover what is written in our flag. That was written in 1889.
Order in progress.
Order in progress is a positivistic expression of, you know, an idea. So, you know what? Forget about. Be local. You know, locally, as we ever have done, the samba will be produced in the favelas. The religion will be practiced inside of our homes. No? good recipes will be invented in our kitchens, you know, and we can try to live with less money and this idea of a big country, a huge country, and be local. This would be my bet.
It's a good way.
Think about local documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
People are very interested in local things, not in national things. National things are from the 50s. This would be my suggestion for you. Think about local. What's happening in your locality?
Right. Good.
You know, and the simulacrum of this, to be very Elitian, is the Big Brother. The Big Brother, you know, the program, the TV show, is a simulacrum and shows how much people are interested in what's happening local instead of a national. So I would say, forget about a documentary about Brazil. Brazil never existed. There are thousands of Brazils, very interesting, very good people, very good scenarios, you know, different microclimates, different micro cultures, you know, recipes and tastes and songs and musics and instruments and things that will continue to be local, under the radar zone of the government. This would be my bet. I'm not sure about what I'm saying, but this would be my bet.
Good.
Provocative, at least.
Very. I wish we could stay longer, but I have to take you to the airport.
I hope so.
Thank you, Claudio.
You're welcome.